Welcome to The Last Stories, where unsolved mysteries, forgotten disappearances, and the pointy ace, ghosts of the past, come alive through each story. If you're passionate about chilling cases and truths buried for decades, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another haunting journey with us. Today, we dive into one of the most disturbing stories ever told, the mass disappearance of 12 children during a birthday party in 1993 at the Braxton Estate in southern Illinois. No trace, no screams, no explanation. But 32 years later, the younger brother of the birthday girl, now a professional therapist, returns to that very house. What he discovers beneath the rotting wooden floorboards will make you never look at a birthday party the same way again. This isn't just a disappearance. This is a real-life game. And the next round is about to begin. The 1993 disappearance. When a birthday party became a 3-decade nightmare. On the 10th of July, 1993, in the quiet countryside of southern Illinois, a children's birthday party was held at the Braxton Estate, a renovated Victorian mansion turned campsite. The birthday girl was Clare Weldon, freshly 10 years old, glowing in a yellow dress and an innocent smile. 12 children from nearby towns, ages 9 to 11, had received handcrafted invitations, glittering with the number 10, promising a joyful, harmless gathering scheduled to end at 5 p.m., just as their parents had been told. But at 5:02 p.m., when Claire's mother returned to the party room after a brief phone call on the porch, she found only a chilling silence. A birthday cake, still untouched with 12 perfect slices, party hats left behind, and an eerily empty room. No children, no footprints, no sounds, no windows opened, no signs of struggle, no blood. The front door was still locked from the inside. And then the screams began, one by one. Parents stepped into the quiet room and started to cry out in horror. 12 children had vanished without a trace. Soon after, police arrived and searched every inch of the estate, the basement, the attic, even rumored hidden corridors. Nothing. 2 weeks later, the Braxton Estate was permanently shut down. The Weldon family collapsed. The father left. The mother disappeared soon after, presumed suicide, though her body was never found. And Claire's little brother, Evan Weldon, just 5 years old at the time, grew up haunted by that day, that house, and the sister who never came home. 32 years later, in 2024, Evan, now a trauma therapist, returned to the Braxton Estate, armed with an original blueprint he found buried in Williamson County's archive. That blueprint revealed a sealed room beneath the stage floor, a space never mentioned in the blank 1993 investigation. There, he discovered a soundproof chamber, 12 small chairs arranged in a circle, birthday, hats covered in dust, and a long bench etched with the names of all 12 children, including Claire. But that wasn't all. Evan also found a handwritten letter from Claire, dated the 9th of July, 1993, just one day before the party. In it, she wrote about 2 strange boys who showed up uninvited, carrying a plastic box. They claimed it was a game, with brutal rules. Only one gets to leave. The one who doesn't scream wins. What began as an innocent celebration slowly unraveled into a horrifying psychological experiment. What Evan uncovered next, from hidden tapes and buried documents to a photograph of Claire as an adult, suggested that the children weren't kidnapped. They were chosen, not just to be tested, but to be trained, replaced, and made part of a cycle that never ends. So now the real question isn't what happened in 1993. It's who's being invited next. Evan Weldon returns. After 32 years, when memory breaks its silence in the past, awakens. Many people grow up with unanswered mysteries, but few spend their entire lives under the shadow of a nightmare that never had a name. For Evan Weldon, It all began in the summer of 1993, when he was just 5 years old. His sister, Clare Weldon, was celebrating her 10th birthday at the Braxton Estate, a crumbling Victorian mansion in southern Illinois, temporarily repurposed as a summer camp. Evan was, quote, too young to attend. He stayed home, while Claire and 11 other children walked through the grand doors of Braxton and never came back out. The disappearance shook the entire state. Police combed through the mansion, every room, every crawl space, every shadow, but found nothing. No blood, no broken locks, no signs of a struggle or forced entry. By 5:02 p.m., the birthday room was silent as a grave. 12 untouched slices of cake, party hats scattered across the floor, and not a single child in sight. Claire was among the missing. The Weldon family shattered. Their father walked away. Their mother vanished a year later, ruled a suicide, though her body was never recovered. And Evan, the youngest, grew up among whispers, pitiful stares, and dreams filled with half-imagined images. But one thing never changed: the haunting pull of that house, and the case and reason question of what happened inside it. 32 years later, in the summer of 2024, Evan, now a trauma therapist who's helped hundreds of survivors through their darkest moments, made a decision to return, not out of curiosity, but because of a question that had never left his heart. What really happened to Claire? Armed with the original architectural plans of the Braxton Estate, uncovered in a forgotten file box at the Williamson County Archives, Evan discovered something that shook his very foundation. A hidden, soundproof chamber that never appeared in public records, buried directly beneath the birthday room stage. Inside it, he found 12 small children's chairs, birthday hats, now faded with time, a long wooden bench, etched with the names of all 12 children, including Claire, and a rusted filing cabinet holding horrifying photographs. Children standing in a row, some blindfolded, some holding placards with numbers. One photo bore a chilling caption: 10 invited, 12 arrived, 1 walked out. The number is everything. The deeper Evan went, the more twisted the maze became. A hidden letter Claire had written before the party, a videotape capturing distant screams in the dark, and whispers, unplaceable, almost inhuman, coming from beneath the floorboards. Then, the impossible, a Polaroid photo of Claire as an adult, standing in a room labeled Observation Wing, her face expressionless, as if the person she once was had been erased. That's when Evan understood. His sister hadn't disappeared. She'd been kept, transformed, and made part of a cruel system known as the Rounds, an experimental cycle that used children as pawns in a game where only one was allowed to survive. Now, after 32 years, Evan Weldon is no longer the boy at the window watching his sister disappear. He's come back, with light, with truth, and with a mission to end the nightmare. But the real question is, did he come to rescue someone, or to take their place? The hidden room revealed the sealed truth beneath the floorboards and the empty chairs. When Evan Weldon returned to the Braxton Estate in the summer of 2024, he didn't just bring the weight of repressed childhood memories. He carried a piece of evidence that had never surfaced in the original 1993 investigation, the estate's original architectural blueprint, discovered inside a decaying file box at the Williamson County Archives. What that blueprint revealed sent a chill down his spine: a completely sealed room, located directly beneath the birthday room stage. No staircase, no windows, no construction permits, no mention in any official report. This wasn't just a forgotten space. It was the silent heart of the tragedy. Under flashlight glow, Evan pried up the warped wooden floorboards until one hollow plank groaned like it was weeping. Beneath it, a rusted ladder descending into a small, soundproof chamber, its walls lined with moldy black insulation. The thick, stale air made it hard to breathe. He switched on a floodlight, clipped a GoPro to his chest, and began his descent. The first thing he saw, 12 small plastic chairs, arranged in a perfect circle at the center of the room. Nearby, a pile of birthday hats, faded and dusty, still catching glimmers of glitter in the harsh light, like time itself had tried to preserve a memory of that day. Each chair faced inward, like part of a ritual carefully staged in advance. In the corner of the room, Evan spotted a long wooden bench. And that's where the true terror began to settle in. Carved into the bench were 12 names, scratched into the wood with frantic, uneven strokes, as if written in panic or in the dark. Some names were clear: Claire, Sam, Ezra. Others were initials, or just numbers. But one name made Evan freeze. Clare, his sister's name, etched deep into the wood like a final cry for help. This room wasn't a cell. It was an emotional testing ground, a place where children were watched, assessed, and selected. Near the bench sat a rusted filing cabinet, filled with Polaroid photos and old negatives. Most of the photos showed children standing against soundproofed walls, some blindfolded, some holding numbered signs. One image was labeled with a cryptic note: 10 invited, 12 arrived, 1 walked out. The number is everything. Everything once believed to be a tragic disappearance now revealed itself as a deliberate ritual, not random, not an accident. This had been a test from the very beginning, and that sealed room was the basement of a game, Planets, one where only a single child could leave. The rest would be dealt with. Evan ran his fingers across Claire's carved name, feeling the tremble ripple through his fingertips. This wasn't just where his sister had been. This was where she had fought to survive, or maybe to protect the others. Now, 32 years later, Evan wasn't on the outside anymore. He had stepped into the center, and there, buried in the silence, he found the truth that was never meant to be uncovered. But with that truth came a new question. Who built this room? And how many other children had once sat in those tiny chairs, waiting for their turn to come? Chilling visual evidence. When a videotape exposes a twisted psychological game where only one child was allowed to get out. For more than 3 decades since the mysterious disappearance at the Braxton Estate, everything related to the 12 missing children had faded into silence. A cold case. A tragedy without answers. A nightmare with no resolution. But everything changed when Evan Weldon, younger brother of birthday girl Clare Weldon, discovered a tightly sealed black plastic box hidden beneath the soundproof room's floorboards. Inside it, along with a worn-out stuffed rabbit and a childlike warning letter, written in Claire's handwriting, was an unedited high-8 videotape, scribbled across its surface. Clare, final. With a playback unit and digital restoration gear in his van, tools Evan used to help treat PTSD survivors, he carefully fed the tape into the machine. The screen flickered. The screen flickered. Familiar hum of static filled the air. And then, the first images appeared. A seemingly ordinary birthday party. Balloons. Cake. Faint music in the background. Claire came into frame, smiling brightly with a smudge of cake frosting on her cheek. A moment of innocence that felt heartbreakingly pure. Then, without warning, the frame cut. No more laughter. No more music. Just black. When the image returned, everything had changed. Same room, but now only 12 small chairs stood in a circle. Dim light flickered overhead. In the center sat a cloudy plastic box. No labels, no markings. A deep male voice spoke calmly. Pick one. Then Claire's voice, soft, hesitant. Number. Another child chimed in, likely a boy. This isn't funny anymore. One of them began to cry. The camera shook. The angle shifted, like it was being held by trembling hands. And then the screen went black again. Just before the footage ended, a final whisper, barely audible. Numbers matter. Evan sat frozen. No longer vague memories. No more secondhand stories. Now he had undeniable, living proof, not only that the children had been inside that room, but that they were part of a system designed to test them like lab rats in a maze. In subsequent footage, recovered from fragments of tapes scattered around the property, including a photograph tucked beneath the wooden bench, Evan uncovered a repeating pattern. Each round presented a high-stress psychological scenario. One Polaroid showed the children pressed against a soundproof wall, some blindfolded, others holding signs with numbers. One photo bore the note. 10 were invited. 12 total. One was empty. But what was written on the back chilled him deeper. Only one walked out. The true nature of what had happened was becoming terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was a survival game. A controlled environment where children were observed, recorded, and ultimately selected or discarded. In a handwritten letter Claire had left behind, she wrote, 2 boys showed up who weren't invited. They said they were friends of Sam. They laughed too loudly. One had a gold tooth. They brought the box and said it was the game. They told me I had to choose. But I didn't. So he chose. What Evan saw was no longer the invention of a haunted child's imagination. This was a structured system, with a voice, with rules, with design. Each round, or the rounds, appeared to test emotional control, fear response, submission, and who could survive without screaming. As the tape ended, Evan said nothing. But he understood. Someone had stood behind that camera, watching, recording, controlling it. All. Claire hadn't vanished. She had been forced to play. And somewhere along the way, she had become something else. No longer frightened. No longer resisting. Just obedient. The tape was living evidence. And also a warning. They weren't looking to save the children. They were looking for the one who could endure the most. And in that game, only one was allowed to get out. But the price of survival might be far worse than death. Claire is still alive. When a Polaroid reveals the painful truth about the last survivor. For more than 3 decades, the final image of Clare Weldon existed only in the fading memories of those who loved her. A 10-year-old girl beaming at her birthday party, holding an untouched cake, surrounded by smiling children from nearby towns. But when the clock struck 5:02 p.m. on the 10th of July, 1993, Claire, along with 11 other children, vanished from the party room at Braxton Estate, as if the house itself had swallowed them whole. For Evan Weldon, her younger brother, that pain never healed. But deep down, he had never truly believed that Claire was dead. And in the summer of 2024, that belief was confirmed in the most heartbreaking way. Inside a sealed plastic container buried beneath the floor of the soundproof room at Braxton Estate, alongside disturbing evidence like tiny children's chairs, dusty birthday hats, and a twisted videotape, Evan found a single Polaroid photo. It wasn't carelessly stored with the other broken files, but carefully hidden beneath the wooden bench, etched with the names of the 12 children, as if someone had left it there for the right person to find. And when he turned it over, time stopped. The photo showed a young woman, early 20s, hair neatly tied back, standing before a metal door labeled Room 104, with a dark corridor stretching behind her. Her name tag bore only a code, no last name. But her face, older, colder, hardened, was unmistakable. It was Claire. Facial recognition software confirmed an 87% match, allowing for age progression and physical development. And beneath the photo, a handwritten note. Promoted. Observation Wing. Claire, the little girl from the birthday party with cake and pin the tail on the unicorn, was still alive. But she was no longer a victim. She had become part of the system. Through confidential files from the Illinois State Police and a series of documents recovered from the abandoned Crowning Promise experimental facility, Evan and investigator Morales slowly pieced the truth together. And then, the name Clare Weldon appeared again, this time in a behavioral report, coded as Subject 01. The report described her as displays no fear, no emotional response under pressure, immediate compliance with directives, strong observational skills, Recommended for promotion to moderator. 2. Oversee the next round. Claire didn't just survive. She ascended. She became the operator. The one who keeps the wheel turning. The one who wears the crown. And that changed everything. Evan, who had spent a lifetime searching for the truth, hoping to rescue his sister, now stood before a truth almost too devastating to bear. Claire didn't need saving. She had been chosen to run the next round. And if that was true, then the twisted psychological system never really ended. It simply began looking for a successor. And Claire, the girl from that long-ago birthday party, was now the one writing the test for the next children to come. Discovery of the shadow organization crowning numbers. The dark side of a child. Psychological control program. When Evan Weldon first stepped back into Braxton Estate after more than 30 years, he was simply hoping for the truth, or at least an explanation for that fateful day in 1993, when his sister and 11 other children vanished without a trace. But what he found went far beyond a soundproof room beneath the floorboards or a disturbing videotape showing children being forced to play a game called Choose the Survivor. What Evan uncovered was the footprint of a hidden organization, a name never mentioned in official reports, yet present in the darkest corners of the recovered files. Crowning Numbers Inc. The name first appeared in a 1992 financial disclosure filed by a front company claiming to fund special education institutions. In the footnotes, Evan read words that sent chills down his spine. Asterisk structured enrichment for high-potential minds. Controlled scenarios. Group calibration. Asterisk, one remains. The phrasing was polished, clinical, but between the lines was a disturbing philosophy. They weren't nurturing children. They were reconstructing their minds through simulated trauma scenarios, or in other words, trial rounds. The deeper Evan dug, the clearer it became. Crowning Numbers wasn't just a sponsor. They were the architects behind the entire experimental system housed within Braxton Estate, where children weren't invited to parties, but to undergo highly controlled psychological trials, all designed to identify a child who could suppress emotion, resist fear, and obey. In a handwritten confidential memo from a former deputy who was suspended after the 1993 Braxton case, one line stood out. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was a selection. Always 12. Never more, never less. And only one walks out. When Evan finally located the abandoned headquarters of Crowning Numbers, disguised as the Crowning Promise Behavioral Facility, all doubts were erased. Inside the crumbling building, he and investigator Morales uncovered hundreds of simulation, logs, behavior evaluations, and surveillance footage of the trial rounds. Asterisk, the silence round, where children were forced to stare at one another without blinking. Asterisk, the flame round, where they were told to keep a candle lit with their bare hands. Asterisk, and the selection round, where one child was asked to identify who should be eliminated. What was more terrifying than the trials themselves was the fact that this system wasn't designed by religious fanatics or fringe cults. It was funded, staffed, and operated as a scientific research project. One internal document, restored by Evan, was signed by Dr. D. Wren, a behavioral theorist, who had mysteriously disappeared after facing multiple allegations of unauthorized testing on, quote, minors. That's when Evan realized what happened at Braxton wasn't an isolated event. It was just one node in a larger, interconnected network orchestrated by Crowning and Time. Numbers. They didn't kidnap children to kill them. They were programming them. Each trial round was a phase in a psychological reconditioning process. The children who failed were removed. The one who survived was upgraded. And worst of all, the system never stopped. Invitation letters are still being sent. New rounds are already in development. And now, a new name has appeared on the list of those chosen. Evan Weldon. The question is no longer who is behind this. It's who will wear the crown next. Traces of the other children, when trunks, belongings, and scorecards reveal a cold-blooded selection system. In the damp shadows of an abandoned storage warehouse west of Benton, Illinois, once a logistics outpost for the Braxton Estate, Evan Weldon and investigator Morales stood before a section sealed off with X-shaped police tape. Behind it, 3 small children's trunks sat neatly on a rusted metal shelf. At first glance, they looked like ordinary summer camp luggage, small, colorful, almost innocent. But as they opened each lid, layers of dust fell like silent witnesses to the horrors waiting inside. Trunk 03, marked with the initials KY, contained a single child's shoe, worn out, faded red, its sole nearly gone. Trunk 07, labeled Sam, held a broken Viewmaster, still loaded with a cartoon film reel. Trunk 09, without any identifiable name, held only one item: a crumpled red birthday hat, stained with a dark, unknown blotch. But those were just the surfaces. When the forensics team peeled back the linings, they discovered hidden compartments, each storing tightly sealed personal items, as though preserved either as evidence or trophies. A small comb engraved with a name, a pair of socks stitched with faint stars, a shaky crayon, drawing with the word mommy written beneath it. These weren't just artifacts. They screamed a truth no words could say. The children weren't just taken. They were watched, assessed, and sorted like specimens in a behavioral experiment. What chilled Morales most was what they found tucked behind a false panel in trunk 03, a scorecard, a faded yellow sheet, wax-coated. 12 names scribbled in messy handwriting. Some full names, others just initials, each followed by tally marks, crude, deliberate. Next to some names, a red X was slashed across. In one corner, a drawing of an eye crossed out. Claire, the birthday girl who disappeared, had no marks beside her name. Not a sign of weakness, but the mark of an observer. They were keeping score, Morales whispered, like a test. Each trial was part of a psychological scale. Who panicked, who resisted, who obeyed. They were all flagged. Those who failed to meet expectations were eliminated. Those who reacted appropriately were retained. The deeper Evan dug, the more undeniable it became. Another recovered note read, *Jill, uncontrollable fear response in fire round, eliminated. *Paolo, overly curious, moved to observer pool. *Ezra, passed 4 rounds, stopped at round 5. No further advancement. This wasn't a disappearance. It was a behavioral filtration system. At the Crowning Promise testing facility, Morales and Evan discovered a monitoring chart taped behind a filing cabinet, a flow chart outlining all the trial rounds. *Round 1, the ball test, measuring coordination under pressure. *Round 5, the mask test. Children forced to wear animal masks and react to their own reflections. *Round 10, the selection round, one child told to point to the one who should leave. Each detail, from the single worn shoe to the primitive scorecard, led to one horrifying conclusion. The children weren't taken to be held. They were taken to be tested, to see who would scream, who would obey, and who might one day become the crown bearer, the successor. As Evan stared at the children's belongings, preserved like crime scene evidence, he whispered, they didn't want to know who survived. They wanted to know who fit. Those trunks weren't just remnants of victims. They were behavioral dossiers, psychological blueprints, boarding passes to continue, or a final, silent full stop. The rounds, 12 levels of fear, a system of child selection built on obedience and endurance. At the heart of the chilling mass disappearance of 1,993 at the Braxton Estate lies more than just the mystery of 12 children vanishing without a trace. What investigator Evan Weldon uncovered was a sophisticated and merciless system known only by a cold clinical name: the rounds. As Evan peeled back layer after layer of the past, he didn't just find a sealed room, disturbing photographs or whispers caught on old cassette tapes. He discovered something far more sinister. The children hadn't simply been taken. They had been put through a series of challenges, each step designed to classify and separate. Each round was a carefully designed psychological test, engineered to extract and exploit the most primal human responses in children: fear, panic, and submission. Evidence recovered from the Crowning Promise facility, along with video footage left behind by Clare, revealed the structure: 12 distinct rounds, each a psychological wall the children had to scale or fall from. Round 1. The ball. What seemed like a harmless game. Blindfolded children passing a ball in a circle. But each time the ball was passed incorrectly, a blinding flash or piercing sound would erupt. Purpose: to measure reactions under sensory disruption and obedience in a controlled chaos. Round 2. The room. A silent endurance test. Children were locked in pitch-black, soundproof rooms for an aggrasted close, undetermined amount of time. Those who screamed, pounded the walls, or broke down emotionally were labeled unstable. Those who remained quiet were kept. Round 5. The mask. The most clearly recorded test in Clare's video archive. Each child was made to wear a distorted animal mask and stare at themselves in a mirror. Some cried. Some vomited. Some didn't react at all. This was a test of self-recognition and identity disassociation, that who broke down, who accepted the new face, and who froze in fear. Round 8. The fire. A trial of trust. Each child was given a candle and tasked with keeping the flame alive in total darkness. If the candle went out, a siren blared and the room's lighting shifted drastically. Some notes described how a few children intentionally set fire to their birthday hats, resulting in their removal from the group. This round tested behavior control under looming threat. Round 10. The selection. Arguably the cruelest of all. One child, often Clare, was told to point at another member of the group. What happened next was never made clear, but internal records from the organization, crowning numbers included this note: Subject 01 shows increased compliance. No hesitation during peer elimination. Round 12. The crown. No longer a test. This was the destination. The successful child was given a choice: forget everything and become an outsider, or retain the memory and become the successor, the one who would oversee the next cycle. Clare chose to remember, and with that, she became the crown bearer. In a final piece of recovered footage, Clare's voice plays through an old speaker. Rounds are not punishment. They are preparation. Preparation for what? That's the question that kept Evan awake at night. Because if the 12 rounds were designed to find the strongest child, then round 13, the one Evan was about to enter, might determine who inherits the fear itself. Clare wasn't eliminated. She was promoted. The crown bearer, the final survivor, and the architect of fear. For over 3 decades, the name Clare Weldon was synonymous with loss. With a Clare Weldon birthday party that turned into tragedy. And with that haunting photo of 12 empty chairs, a symbol of the most mysterious child disappearance in Illinois history. Everyone believed that Clare, like the other 11 children, had been kidnapped, harmed, or vanished forever into the dark. But in the summer of 2024, Evan Weldon, Clare's younger brother, uncovered something more terrifying than death. Clare was never eliminated from the system. She was chosen, and she was promoted. The truth began with a single Polaroid photo discovered in a soundproof room beneath the stage. In the photo stood Clare, no longer the blonde-haired girl in a party dress, but a grown woman with an empty stare, positioned in front of observation room, 104-inch in R. Unnamed facility. Scrawled beneath the image: promoted, observation wing. Clare wasn't a victim. She was the one selected to observe, to manage, and to keep the game going. Subsequent documents found within the Crowning Promise facility confirmed Clare's role. In a behavioral file marked Subject 1, Clare Weldon, researchers noted, subject shows high adaptability to multi-layered trial structure. No signs of distress post. Round 5. Increased compliance. Observed in round 8. No hesitation during round 10. The selection. Recommended for role transfer to next round management. These findings matched footage Evan had painstakingly restored, in which a calm male voice declared, "Only one gets out. The one who doesn't scream." Moments later, Claire is seen calmly pointing at another child when prompted to decide who would leave. In the twisted psychological labyrinth known as the rounds, where each stage was a brutal test of the human psyche, Claire didn't just survive. She adapted, overcame, and became a mechanism of the very system that imprisoned her. But the most disturbing question was not, why didn't she escape? It was, when did she stop being a victim and start being in control? The answer may lie in the final tape found inside a small plastic box marked with the initials C.W. Clare Weldon. On the tape, Claire's voice, still that of a 10-year-old girl, whispers, "They said if I listened and learned how to choose, I wouldn't be scared anymore. I'd be the one who stays, the one who keeps the rounds going." That was the promotion. When a child stops being afraid, stops reacting, and begins observing like an adult, the system no longer sees them as a player. They become the operator. Claire became the crown bearer, the one who chooses who survives, who gets removed, the watcher of the trials, the one who gives the commands. In the Crowning Promise Records room, Morales uncovered a sealed document. At the bottom, Claire's name appeared beneath the chilling label, "Transfer to Control Wing Approved." And just beneath that, the date, the 2nd of August, 1993. Only 23 days after the birthday party, in a system engineered to find the most enduring, the most obedient, the most resilient child, Claire did not break. She was not freed. She was kept not to be released, but to ensure the trials continue, generation after generation. And the final, bone-chilling question, the one that haunts Evan, is no longer, is Claire still alive? But rather, is Claire still Claire? Or has she become the embodiment of the very system that turned her into its instrument? Claire chose Evan, a return orchestrated 32 years ago, and the one chosen wasn't a victim, but an heir. Some returns are accidental, but others are orchestrated not by fate, but by an unseen hand. For Evan Weldon, the journey back to Braxton Estate in the summer of 2024 seemed like a personal decision, a search for truth, a desperate attempt to uncover what happened to his sister who vanished in 1993. But the deeper he ventured into the labyrinth of truth, the clearer it became. Claire, his sister, had called him back. She had chosen him, and she had been preparing for this moment for 32 years. The first clue was a handwritten letter from Claire, hidden deep inside a sealed box beneath the floor of the soundproof room. The letter was dated the 9th of July, 1993, just one day before the infamous birthday party. In it, Claire described strange details about two unfamiliar boys who arrived at the party, but, more chillingly, she left a cryptic warning. "Hide it if I'm not back. Burn it if he finds it. Don't tell him I told." But who was the you Claire was speaking to? The answer became clear when Evan found a faded Polaroid in the same box. On the back, in shaky handwriting, for E.W. Evan Weldon. No one else. The recovered footage of the trial rounds ended with a whisper. You weren't supposed to come back. But Evan did come back, not just because he was the only living person still connected to what happened, but because Claire had planned for him to be the one to return, the witness, the bearer of memory, the one to decide whether the system would continue or end. In the final box, Evan uncovered in the lowest level of the Braxton Estate, inside the Braxton Estate Crown Room, he found a cassette tape labeled, "For E.W. Final Game. Don't play alone." When Evan and Investigator Morales played the tape, Claire's voice echoed, young, but resolute. "Hi, Evan. If you found this, then I didn't fail. They made me watch the others, over and over, until I stopped crying. They said if I made it, I'd be the one who chooses. But I remembered something you said when we were little. There's no such thing as magic. Only people pretending to be more powerful than they are. Claire didn't leave instructions for the police. Not for the media. Not for any official. She left everything for Evan. Because she knew only the boy who lost his sister, his family, his childhood, could be brave enough to face the true darkness. The system that consumed her. And that wasn't all. Under the 12th chair, the final one in the circle where every trial began, Claire left a blanks for Levantine. Map, but not of streets. Of the rounds. From the ball to the crown, each round marked with chilling precision. At the end was a single cryptic label. Witness or successor. And in that moment, Evan understood. Claire didn't choose him to save her. She chose him to inherit or destroy the cycle. He was the last witness. But he could also become the next operator. The one to wear the crown. Or the one to break it. And in that choice, Claire gave Evan the ultimate power. To the side. Because he was the only one she still trusted. The only one who carried both memory and compassion. A boy who once trembled in fear, and now must learn how not to scream. Round 13 begins. The red door opens, and the final game forces Evan to choose. Forget everything, or replace the very sister he's been searching for. They once said Braxton Estate was where time stopped, but no one imagined that behind moss-covered walls and beneath rotting wooden floors, time didn't stop. It repeated. When Evan Weldon and investigator Morales discovered the red door in the estate's deepest basement, hidden behind a false wall, they didn't just uncover a sealed passage. They awakened a system that had been dormant for 32 years, waiting for the right person to return, the one who had been chosen. The door had no handle, only a small round brass lock, engraved with a familiar symbol, A, key piercing a circle. The same emblem found in crowning numbers ink documents, on the plastic case holding Claire's cassette. When Morales used the wax seal from Claire's envelope to unlock it, the door clicked open, with a dry snap, like the first note of a forgotten song. Behind the door lay a narrow, dark hallway that seemed endless. Old electrical tubing lined the ceiling. The walls bore deep scratch marks, as if something had once been dragged away in terror. But what truly made their breath catch was the echo of a sound from deep within. Click, click, click. It was unmistakable. The sound that had marked the trials all those years ago. The system was rebooting, and like a living body, the house woke up. They entered the crown room, the final chamber, now revealed as a stage for the ultimate décision. At its center stood a stone pedestal. Atop it, a red crown, wrapped in copper wire and strands of film from old surveillance reels. Beside it sat a thick, wax-sealed envelope marked, "For the next one." As Evan reached toward the pedestal, a monitor flickered to life. A countdown appeared. 2:59分59秒. Then a voice echoed from a speaker mounted on the wall. Claire's voice, but no longer young. Now it was steady, detached, almost hollow. If you're hearing this, then the house has been reopened. The crown is unclaimed. One always forgets. The other becomes the door. The system had restarted. Round 13 hat begun. All the materials Evan had gathered, the map of the 12 trials, behavioral records, drawings from the control room, all led to this final round, the crown. This was no longer an experiment. This was the destination. One person, one choice. Either forget it all, the memories, the pain, the truth, and become an outsider, or keep it all and become the next operator of the system. Evan stood silent, eyes locked on the crown. It wasn't a symbol of triumph. It was a final shackle. On one of Claire's tapes she had said, "They said if I wore it, I'd never be afraid again." But I wasn't sure if that meant I was brave, or just empty. And now it was Evan's turn. He carried memories of a sister who once hugged him when it rained, of a stuffed rabbit with a torn ear, of a birthday cake that was never cut. But he also carried a brutal truth. His sister had become part of this system, and now they wanted him to replace her. Morales stood behind him, hand on his gun, whispering, "We can destroy it. Don't let it continue." But Evan knew. Breaking it was easy. Bearing it was not. The room fell silent. The countdown continued. And then Evan leaned down and lifted the crown from its pedestal, not because he sought power, but because he couldn't let round 14 begin with another child. Round 13 had started. A new crown bearer had been chosen. And the final question echoed in Evan's mind like a warning. Will you break the door or become it? Evan chooses the crown, a sacrifice, or a fall into darkness. Some choices don't come with right or wrong answers, only loss. And as Evan Weldon stood in the room known as the Crown Room, the dust-covered, red crown before him, he knew he had reached the point of no return. Behind him stood Investigator Morales, the companion through this entire journey, the prophet, one who still believed the system could be destroyed. But Evan, with the intuition of a child who had once survived, who once dreamed of his sister in the middle of stormy nights, knew the truth. This door couldn't be broken. It could only be replaced. In front of him was the crown, not made of gold, not gleaming with glory. It was crafted from twisted copper wire and strips of old surveillance film, as if forged from the pain of the children who had once passed through this place. Beside it sat a thick envelope, sealed in red wax. On it was written, "For the next one." Evan opened it. Inside was a photograph of Claire, around 24 years old, standing in this very room, her place Graham, head slightly bowed, eyes hollow. Scrawled across the bottom in handwriting, "I wanted to save them all." Then Claire's voice echoed from the ceiling speakers, cold as if spoken from hell itself. "This isn't about punishment, Evan. It's about what you're willing to carry." Evan said nothing. He just looked at the crown. Throughout this journey, he had believed he was the seeker of answers, a little brother, trying to save his sister from silent memories. But now, he understood. Claire didn't need saving. She had become part of the system, a cog in the machine. He turned to Morales. She whispered, "We still have time. Don't let it start again. We can end this." Evan replied, "End it how? Break it? Just for it to rebuild itself? Or hold it, so no one else has to wear it?" Morales fell silent. Evan knew the price of this decision. If he wore the crown, he would remember everything. The screams, the blurred faces, the chosen children, and Claire herself. But in return, he would become part of the system, not an observer, the operator. And then, he reached out his hand. The crown was ice cold, as if it had been frozen for 32 years. As it touched his forehead, the entire room shuddered. Lights flickered. A monitor lit up with glowing red text. Round 13 confirmed. New operator identified. EW. Evan staggered slightly, as if the memories of the system and of Claire came crashing into him. He saw the trials, the frightened children, the cold scoring charts, the merciless decisions, and in the middle of it all, a small boy in red shoes crying, calling for his sister. Himself. In the final moment, Morales stepped forward, trying to hold him back, but it was too late. The room sealed behind her, and only Claire's voice remained. This time the real Claire. From her final recording, "One always forgets. The other becomes the door." Evan did not forget. He chose to remember. But the price of memory was becoming part of the cruel cycle. And from today forward, the crown has a new bearer. The truth about Claire. Not the one who escaped, but the one who stayed behind. A child programmed to become the gatekeeper of fear. For 3 decades following the mass disappearance at Braxton Estate in 1993, the name Clare Weldon was remembered as the tragic symbol of a little girl who never turned 11. For years, the world believed Claire was a victim, an innocent child swept up in a mass abduction, vanishing like dust in the wind. But when Evan Weldon, her younger brother, returned to the scene 32 years later with an old map and a flashlight, he didn't uncover a grave. He uncovered a truth, living, merciless, and ice-cold. Claire never escaped. She was kept, and she became part of the system. Every clue pointed back to her, In the sealed room beneath the stage, where 12 children once vanished, Evan found her name scratched into the wooden bench, the letters shaky like a cry carved in desperation. He found a hastily written note, left for someone. "If I don't come back." But what made his heart sink was the final cassette tape, marked, "For EW, final game." On the tape, Claire's voice played, a child's voice, but tired, trembling, and heartbreakingly clear. "They made me watch. Again and again. Said I'd learn the pattern. Said if I didn't scream, I could be the one who chooses." They had made her watch. The trials, the children screaming, the flickering lights, the echoing sounds, the merciless decisions. They told her, if she didn't resist, if she didn't scream, if she didn't show fear, she could become the one who chooses. And Claire succeeded. Recovered files from the Crowning Promise facility confirmed it. In the records, she was listed as Subject 01, Clare Weldon, with chilling researcher notes. Flawless compliance after round 5. No emotional response under extreme conditions. Exceptional observational ability. Recommended for moderator role. The child once believed to be a victim had not just survived. She had been trained. She had been programmed. By stripping away her emotions, she became stable, qualified, no longer seizing under isolation, no longer crying when forced to choose who gets eliminated. And then she was promoted, relocated to the observation wing, where each child was monitored, each action scored, and each reaction fed into the system. In a photograph found later, Claire, now older, short-haired, eyes hollow, stands outside. Room 104. One hand on the doorknob, the other holding a nameless badge. Beneath the photo, only one line. Promoted. Operator confirmed. That meant one thing. Claire had become the operator. Not just a survivor, but someone who accepted the role. Evan couldn't believe it. He had always imagined his sister as someone trapped, a soul stuck in darkness, waiting to be freed. But now, all he saw was the perfect product of a deranged psychological system. A child stripped of family memories, of empathy, of resistance, then reprogrammed to take over the game. One entry from the internal logs documented Claire's final evaluation before her promotion. Subject 01 no longer cries. She begins observing others during trauma simulation. Eye contact steady. Decision-making unaffected by peer distress. Recommend role advancement. Facilitator. And so, Claire was no longer the little girl sitting in the circle of 12 chairs, waiting for someone to call her name. She had become the one making the call. The one who didn't cry, didn't hesitate, the one handed the crown, and told to keep the cycle going. Evan whispered, "You didn't leave that room, did you, Claire? You became the room." And in that moment, he understood. Claire was never lost. She was kept to guard the door. And unless Evan acted, the next round would begin again. This time, with another child. A new list. 12 names, 1 warning, and chilling proof that the loop isn't over. When Evan Weldon walked out of the crown room on the early morning of the 17th of July, 2024, he didn't carry a crown. He didn't carry Claire. And he didn't carry a full set of answers. The only thing he held in his hand was a thick, sealed envelope, unlabeled by name or date. Just 5 cold words, typed in plain black ink. For the next one. Inside there were 2 items. First, a cassette tape, hand, labeled in red ink. Audio directive, semuno. Second, a list of 12 names, each with a year of birth and a scattered home address, across Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, and the suburbs of Chicago. All the names belonged to children born between 2013 and 2015. Kids now just 9, 10, or 11 years old. The same age Claire and her friends had been on the day of that fateful birthday party in 1993. Next to each name, handwritten in red ink, was a single word: invited. When Evan brought the cassette to a digital audio lab in Springfield for restoration, the first voice that came through was unmistakable. It was Claire, but not the Claire from the handwritten notes or the trembling childhood recordings. Her voice was older now, calm, detached, and eerily composed, like someone reading from an operator's manual. The crown cannot end. It can only move. I gave Evan the choice I never had. Now he will give it to someone else. Do not look for me. I've already left. But he remembers. And that is enough. Let the invitations begin. Those words froze Evan's blood. For years, he had believed that if he could just find Claire, he could save her. But now he realized, Claire didn't need saving. She had accepted her role. And worse, she had chosen him to succeed her. Evan stared at the list of 12 names. These weren't special children. No one stood out. No one had clear connections. And maybe that was the most terrifying part. They weren't chosen for who they were. They were chosen because the system had to continue. It needed 12 players. It needed one survivor. When Investigator Morales saw the list, she went silent. Then whispered, "Oh God, it's still happening." They never stopped. Once again, the gears of terror began to turn. Once again, the system had selected its next 12. No one knows when the invitations will be delivered. No one knows how it will begin. A party, a summer camp, a school field trip. But one thing is certain. The rounds aren't over. They're just waiting to start again. And this time, Evan Weldon is no longer the boy searching for truth. He's become the one who holds the question. The one who holds the choice. The one who holds the list. The only question is, will he burn it? Or send the next invitation? And if not him, then who will? The loop was never broken. Only the keepers of the loop. They're the ones who change. An ending or a beginning. The folding chair and the red balloon. An open warning for anyone who was ever a child. I thought I was returning to Braxton to close a chapter in my life. A chapter I hadn't been able to turn for 32 years. But as I stepped through the thick woods, down the cracked dirt road once marked by the tire tracks of the van that carried Claire that day, I understood something. There is no true ending if you still carry questions. Braxton is now an empty place. The grand house with the white curtained windows is gone. The backyard, once full of laughter, has vanished. All that remains is uneven earth, scattered broken bricks, and a fallen piece of a welcome sign. Its letters faded with time, but one thing was still there, and it made my chest tighten the moment I saw it. A silver folding chair sitting alone in the middle of the clearing, right where the circle of 12 chairs once stood. On it, a red balloon, tied with golden string, gently swaying in the evening wind. There was no one around. No voices, no machinery. And yet, the presence of that chair and that balloon said more than any scream ever could. It was a promise. Or more precisely, a warning that the rounds haven't stopped. That even though I walked out of the crown room without a crown, even though I burned the last remaining records, the system still exists. Not because it needs to, but because the world still creates children who are easy to choose. Quiet children, vulnerable children, children who are easy to control. You might ask me, then what was the point of it all, if the balloon is still there? My answer is, it mattered. Because there's something I finally understood as I stood there staring at that red balloon. And I want you to understand it too. The thing that kept the system running for all these decades wasn't the technology. It wasn't the labs. It wasn't the people behind the glass. It was silence. We've gotten too used to not asking questions. Too comfortable believing that all horrors are over. But pain, when left unnamed, will always find a way to return, in another form, sometimes as a party, sometimes as a bus ride, sometimes just as a folding chair, with a red balloon. I left Braxton with a conflicted heart, par survivor, par détour. But I also left with a lesson I want to give to anyone who's ever been afraid like a child. Always ask the question. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and speak, even if your voice shakes. Because if no one speaks up, someone else will always prepare the next round. If no one stops it, the folding chair will always be set down, and 12 names will always find their way onto the list. In the end, as I turned to leave, the wind picked up. It pulled the red balloon higher into the sky, then sent it drifting off toward the distant pines. I don't know where it will land, but I know this. I'm no longer the child sitting in that circle. And if you're reading this, maybe you aren't either. Help me keep eyes open. Help me keep the door closed, so no one ever has to wear the crown again.